QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022 OneNote presentation. Bank feeds. Get ready because we bookkeeping pros are moving up the hilltop with QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2022. Here we are in OneNote. If you have access to OneNote, would like to follow along, you're not required to, but if would like to, we're in the icon on the left-hand side, the Topic Introduction tab down in the 1100 Bank Feeds tab. Also note, when using OneNote, take a look at the Immersive Reader tool. Our topic introductions will also be in the text area, same name, same number, but with transcripts that can be translated into multiple different languages and either listened to or read in them. Close in the icon. Also note that when looking at the topic introductions within OneNote, we're going to have the same name and number in a presentation. Topic introductions designed to give an introduction to the topic, provide screenshots and links when applicable, as well as an overview of the accounting topic in general that we will be covering within QuickBooks. Here, we're going to be addressing just basically the bank feeds themselves, giving a quick overview of how the bank feeds work. And then in a whole section at the end of the presentation or at the end of the course, we'll then get into bank feeds more explicitly. So in other words, when we're thinking about the bank feeds, we want to think about the bank feeds in terms of how it's going to fit into our accounting system. The best way to do that is actually to work through the accounting problem, looking at the normal kind of data input without the bank feeds so that we can see what the forms are actually doing. And then when we add the bank feeds or think about how the bank feeds will be added, then we would like to see how they're going to fit into our accounting system, because how well the bank feeds will fit or how we're going to apply the bank feeds will depend on the type of industry we're in. In other words, are we in a full accrual process? Are we in a cash-based process? Am I not even further away from a full accrual process, not just cash-based, but actually depending on the bank statements, the bank feeds themselves to create the financial statements, instead of using the bank feeds as a double check to the financial statements, which may be appropriate in some cases, but it would only basically work if you're in a certain type of industry. So you got to know those things before you add the bank feeds. Otherwise, what will happen is when you add the bank feeds into the computer system, they're going to be in basically bank feed limbo, because the QuickBooks system doesn't have enough information. If you think about it, all the bank has is an inflow, outflow, the date, and then if they're electronic transfers, they might have the memo that can help you to figure out the vendor or the customer. But if they're not electronic and you have other types of deposits and so on, and payments or checks, then you're going to need the canceled checks for any more information than that. Therefore, it doesn't actually start to create your financial statements until you go in and actually assign those transactions to the proper accounts. And you do that by basically knowing how the forms work within QuickBooks and then applying those forms in essence to the transactions that come in through the bank feeds. So we'll go over this. This presentation will just be a overview of the bank feeds, and then at the end of the course, we'll go into bank feeds in a lot more detail. At that point in time, you'll be more prepared to look into the bank feeds. However, if you want to jump into the end course, possibly if you're in a company where you're kind of depending on the bank to create the financials, such as a gig work type of situation, then you might want to get a quick overview of the homepage, get a good idea of that, and then if you want to, you can skip down to the end of the course and go into the bank feeds there. If you don't have access to the software and you go over this presentation, you could use these screenshots to kind of follow along with it. Here's how you get into the Bank Feed Center, and this is going to be basically what the Bank Feed Center looks like when you're looking at the sample file. Bank feeds already having been set up here, and then here's some more information about that kind of bank feed limbo. Transactions coming from the bank, they're in QuickBooks, but they're not yet being used to create the end result, that being the financial statements. And then, of course, you've got your home page and flow chart, which is a good thing to consider and look through and think about your flow with regards to these sections and determine how the bank's going to fit in there, especially if you're using things like bills, which means you have an accounts payable, an accrual kind of component, invoices, which means you have an accrual kind of component because you're tracking accounts receivable, and the payroll, any payroll will throw things off as well. So as you add those accrual components, you got to think about more closely how the bank feeds are going to fit into your process. And we'll talk more about that after we've gone through the whole practice problem in a section in and of itself devoted to bank feeds.